Wordsworth's Ideas About Poetry by Jed Jensen and Braden Baker.
William Wordsworth. William Wordsworth was a Romantic poet who helped launch the Romantic age in English literature.
Early life. William Wordsworth, son of John and Anne Cookston Wordsworth, was born on April 7, 1770, in Cockermouth, Cumberland. He attended an upper-class school in Penrith, which was approximately 45 minutes away from his home. This picture on the right is actually the childhood home of William.
Family. Wordsworth was a middle child in his family of 7. His dad was a financial advisor and was never really a part of William's life. However, William remembers his dad always emphasizing how important reading and writing was in his life. His mother also emphasized this point and was actually the person who taught him how to read at a young age.
Poems. Some of Wordsworth's most famous poems included Daffodils, Tintern Abbey, The Prelude, The Solitary Reaper, and many more.
Wordsworth's ideas about poetry. Wordsworth believed that poetry should include emotional experiences, everyday language, everyday situations, and presentations of the ordinary in unusual ways.
I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud. I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud was one of William's more popular poems. This poem connects to William's ideas in multiple different ways. This poem uses tremendous detail when he reflects on a scene. An example of this is when he says, "And then my heart with pleasure fills, and dances with the daffodils." When reading this part of the poem, a reader gets a very detailed image of the scene in his or her brain. That is one of the big ideas that William hoped he could achieve in his writing. He also shows an example of an emotional experience because the poem always shows a form of joy when it talks about the experiences with the daffodils.
Haiku poems. There are different elements that describe a haiku poem, which include that the poem is 3 lines long, the poem uses a kigo, a word indicating the season, the poem is usually written in the present tense, and the poem does not rhyme.
Yosa Busan. Yosa Busan is a Japanese poet and painter. He is a master haiku poet of ancient Japan. Busan, however, was much more than a master haiku poet. He also was a distinguished painter, and in his haiku, this comes across through a visual intensity and a love for color. This makes his haiku poems very descriptive and unusual.
Yosa Busan and Wordsworth ideas. Autumn evening, there's joy also in loneliness. This haiku uses Wordsworth's ideas about poetry. Busan presents the ordinary in an unusual way by saying there is joy in loneliness, which isn't always thought of at first. This is an effective way to write poetry, and that is why Busan chooses to write like this.
Ode on a Grecian Urn. Ode on a Grecian Urn is a romantic poem written by John Keats. The fact that this poem is romantic indicates that it could have been influenced by William because that was his genre of choice. One of William's ideas is expressed throughout the poem when Keats has a surprisingly emotional reaction to staring at a piece of pottery. Thou still unravished bride of quietness, thou foster child of silence and slow time. He's fascinated by how the images on the urn are captured in a single moment. They're silent and they're not moving forward in time. That's the foster child of silence and slow time. They kind of evoke this stillness or frozenness of the images on the urn.
Overall, William Wordsworth was a very influential scholar. He inspired a whole new form of poetry in European countries and began a drastic change in the way poetry is viewed. His efforts were recognized by many people, and he was appointed to be Poet Laureate of the United Kingdom. This is one of the many honors he received, and even in today's world, people are still using his ideas of poetry in their own writing.